Welcome back to the Nuance. This is going to be another unplanned, unscheduled solo episode because something else came up in my client check-ins this week that I think is worth discussing, particularly because it didn't just come up a singular time. In fact, it came up multiple times across a single day from and with multiple people who live in different parts of the country, who are different ages and are going through their own seasons of their own lives, and yet all had this same common shared experience. And I figured if that's occurring within such a small subset of the population, the 30 to 50 people that I work with at any one individual time, any one given time as an online health and fitness coach, that it's got to be happening as a shared and common experience across a wider audience. And the way that it came up specifically this week was people describing how they feel as being in a rut. And it's so odd. That unique word, specific word, I don't think I've heard for the majority of this entire year. I'm pretty sure I haven't used it, spoken it, or said it at all this entire year. And here I am 3 times in one day this week. And then I also had to talk about it today in a client check-in as well. So 4 times across 4 different people or with 4 different people within the same week, describing this experience of being in a rut. And as a species, I think us human beings are very communal in the sense we're very social, and we find comfort and solace in knowing that there really aren't any unique experiences, but rather we all go through the same things and we all have these same struggles. As bad as it sounds, it's comforting knowing that somebody else is struggling when you are, right? And that's why I felt that it's worth discussing this concept at this time, given that being halfway through December, really getting into the weeds of the holiday season, really close to the tail end of the year, I feel like the word rut is something that is a predictable experience year after year after year during this time for pretty much everybody. Not to mention the economic environment that we are currently in, because it's an election year and things like that. It's not just an economic, but sociological environment that we are in currently. It's just kind of normal and expected. And I think it's worth hearing that from somebody else to say, hey, if you feel like you're going through a challenging time right now, you're not alone, right? Other people are going through it as well. And again, particularly in this time of the year, whether it be due to work picking up, whether it be to travel, whether it be to the social aspect and events that you have on the calendar for the holiday season, there is going to be this sense of strain on our normal routines, our habits, and our systems. And that feels uncomfortable, right? That feels challenging. Oftentimes that can give off a negative vibe or aura or energy. It can feel gloomy, right? It can feel like you are walking or wading through muddy waters. It can just feel hard. We can just feel like we are moving slowly, like we are stagnant. But it is somewhat normal. And I think it's worth hearing the reminder that because of that strain, because of your routine having that pressure on it, because you might have to adjust and adapt what you normally do, whether we're talking about things as small as when you go to sleep and when you wake up, right? Your overall sleep hygiene, when you eat your meals, what you are eating, how much you can move throughout the day, when that happens, what that actually looks like when it does occur. All of those things being forced to change and you being forced to adapt doesn't automatically equate and lead to failure or even lack of progress or lack of success. Or I think the way that most people look at it, or the way that they perceive it to be, is the inability to succeed because of that feeling of or perception of stagnation, right? Of just feeling like we are not going anywhere. And I think it's worth hearing the reminder that during these seasons, during these ruts, that your objective, the way that you actually achieve success, if we can flip the script mentally and actually look at it this way, is to make sure that our priorities stay in line, that our systems and our thoughts are rooted in solid, concrete principles. And that if we look at our habits and behaviors as levels or floors of a building, that we have structural resiliency through stormy weather, through high winds, so that when there is that strain and when there is that pressure, things may shift things may alter, things may move around a little bit, but we hold steady, we hold firm, and we stand strong in what we are focusing on as our main priorities. So, for example, simple, basic things that everybody knows, everybody tries to follow through with when it comes to their health and fitness is consuming, a high protein diet, making sure that we're getting sufficient sleep, making sure that we are exercising frequently, right? It may look very different in terms of how you consume that protein, how many meals you get in order to get that protein in. It might look very different in terms of like what your exercise across the week actually unfolds to be. As long as the boxes themselves are being checked off, as long as the meals, whether they be, pre-made, prepped chicken breast that you grilled a couple of days prior, or whether it be a frozen chicken fillet that you got from the freezer section and kept in the back of your freezer for a month, you're still getting in that protein, right? Whether it be 4 weightlifting sessions across the week, or you're just able to walk a couple of times and then maybe go for a jog or do a yoga class that only takes 10 to 15 minutes, you are still prioritizing the same end goal and objectives. And if you can do that and you can accept and acknowledge the fact that the shift in the actual action and behavior itself is still in alignment with the priority that you really care about, then that is what being successful looks like in these seasons, in these ruts. And then it won't feel so much like a rut because it's usually the perception of stagnation that creates that belief, that creates that feeling, creates that sense, creates that environment. And a big part of this tends to come from our time capacities reducing, the pressure from work, the travel, leading to a shift in our nutrition, right? Our dietary habits and behaviors. I think that is the biggest one that people struggle with, specifically around the holidays. Maybe not so much due to work, unless we consider the holidays as well, because people are bringing in cookies and treats and there's stuff, always things in the break room. There's always these potluck events. And so it's kind of like, from a dietary standpoint, the biggest strain on our typical normal routines that people experience and that they struggle with and that they end up viewing themselves as a failure because of. And there's a post that I made, I think I found this the other day in my archives from Instagram. The post goes like this. It's a written post and it says, the number one way to get rid of guilt or anxiety about food choices during the holiday season is to avoid dismissing your ability to choose before you even face making a decision. Saying things like, I'm afraid I'll cave in, makes it seem like you're not allowed to say yes, that there's only 2 options or 2 outcomes. Either you say no and you're successful, or else you fail, you lose, you are bad, you are wrong. And the thing that most people, as obvious as it may sound, fail to recognize is that you can eat any of the foods at any holiday celebrations that come up and everything will be fine. It's not against the law. You're not going to go to jail. Can overindulging slow down fat loss if that's your current goal? Sure. But here's the other thing that may sound so simple, but is sometimes so hard to acknowledge. It's okay to not always be focusing on fat loss. It's okay to take a break from that specific goal, that specific objective. It's okay for that to not be the determining variable in which you decide if you are going to be successful or failing, if you're losing weight or if you're losing fat or not, right? It's okay to not always be restricting. And here's the big part here. Here's the thing that I think can get you out of that perception of a rut, is to recognize the fact that you can choose to allow yourself to have the meal out, to have the cookie, to have the drink. You are not a failure if you consciously and intentionally choose to say yes. But when you use verbiage like, I don't want to cave in, I don't think I'll be able to resist, by default, you're undermining, you're dismissing, you're taking away that option to say yes. Again, you are making it seem like it's a binary choice. Either you do this, you resist, you say no, or else you fail. But you're allowed to say yes. So now, while there's still time between the actual holidays themselves, between the events that come up with those holidays, what I would urge you to do is mindfully think through ahead of time, what choice do you want to make, right? Do you want to say no and resist? Or do you want to say yes and choose to participate, choose to include, choose to eat the foods, drinks the drinks, or what have you, right? Put the control back into your hands by adopting it's my decision, I have the power mindset. And doing so may change the way that you look at and feel about these holiday temptations, because you can see that at that point, it's a little bit more fluid. There's more of a spectrum as opposed to this just binary, black and white, yes versus no. And don't get me wrong, I fully acknowledge that that type of perspective can't always work or be the best for every single person, right? Some people have a relationship with food where you need to avoid any and all temptations, or else there's going to be a downward spiral that you cannot pull yourself out of. And speaking to those specific circumstances, those specific struggles, those specific people would be outside of my scope. But I am just talking about those, again, who feel like we are in this rut because there's so much strain on that normal, typical behavior, action, thought patterns, and then choices that we actually make when it comes to the food that we're eating, specifically is what I just talked about. But it goes, the same concept applies to everything. What your movement looks like, how often you're exercising, what that exercise looks like, how much we're sleeping, so on and so forth. When it comes to the adjustments and the adaptations to our norms, don't dismiss and take away your ability to choose before you're even presented the option of making a choice, because you're determining and making it binary before there's even a circumstance or a situation in which it could be on a spectrum. And because I have been speaking so much about the dietary aspect here and the temptations around the holiday and the strain around our nutritional choices or our routines and our habits regarding our food, and that being the biggest challenge for so many people this time of year because of the holidays, I also wanted to go over a blog or an email that I wrote in which I think you may find some really beneficial takeaways, some practices, some thoughts, if nothing else, to help you in these specific moments when you find yourself at a holiday party, in the office, when there are pastries in the break room at all times, and you just find yourself constantly thinking about them, pressured, strained in regards to those habits and those behaviors, right? So the blog post, the email was titled Pause. It starts like this. Let me paint a picture for you with a situation we've all found ourselves in about 100 times too many. A project at work came up last minute and led to extra time spent in the office or at the computer. Traffic was backed up today due to construction that has been ongoing for about 2 years, as well as an accident. Your alarm didn't go off in the morning, leading to a rush out the door, and you forgot your coffee and water bottle on the kitchen counter. Your kid hasn't gotten over the cough they've had for an entire week, so you need to stop at the pharmacy on the way home to grab a prescription. You finally get home, and you walk into your kitchen to the dishes from yesterday that never got washed or put in the dishwasher. And then your pocket gets caught on the cabinet handle as you are rushing to the bedroom to change and get ready to prepare dinner for the family. And that last one was the last straw. After all of the above, you say, F it. And on comes the stress eating. You order a pizza instead of cooking. You throw back a few Oreos while you're placing the order on your phone. You have one or two too many slices at dinner. And once your kid is finally sleeping for the night, you pour that 10-ounce, 1 glass of wine with a Costco family-size bag of chips, put on Love is Blind, and pop on the couch for the rest of the night. Sound at least a little bit familiar? Good. Before I go any further, let me make one thing very clear. There's nothing wrong with choosing pizza for dinner. There's nothing wrong with ending your day with a glass of wine. And most importantly, it's okay to feel stressed. It's okay to feel this strain. But wouldn't it be nice to have an effective strategy to prevent the feelings of guilt or shame that often follows in sequence? If you thought, yeah, it would, this is something I struggle with, what I want you to do next time you find yourself somewhere along a similar path as described above, pause. And I do mean that literally. And I'm sure you've heard before, when looking for solutions, stop, take a breath, be mindful, be present. We're all aware the action that we want to take before making any reactionary decision regarding food is to pause. But what is the actual goal or objective or intention when doing so? I like to use one of the following 2 acronyms to make those things crystal clear and easy to remember. PAUSE, pause. P, practice. A, auditing. U, underlying. S, sensations or signals. And E, experienced. Practice, auditing, underlying sensations, experienced. Or pause, pay attention to unidentified senses, sights, sounds, or smells everywhere. Regardless of which you choose, the outcome is the same. You take note of everything going on around you, what you are experiencing in the moment, the who, the what, the where, which ultimately leads us to the why. Why do we make the decisions we do? What are the triggers? What is the reward or outcome we are seeking from behaviors that follow the sensations, stimulation, senses, feelings, environment, etc. Are such behaviors in reality logical and reasonable methods that align with our values and goals? Our outcome is awareness and understanding. But when we have those two things, we are able to develop skills, systems, and structures that we can fall to when stress wants to take over. My hope here is that these acronyms describing the action you already know you should be doing, the pausing, help you actually be mindful and present and identify the ways in which stress presents itself in your life and how and why it alters your behaviors. But such a practice is not limited to stressful times or stress eating. The same concepts apply when we are at parties, social outings, family vacations, etc. The same pause strategy can be applied and used to compare findings between such different occasions. Certainly, there will be some similarities as well as differences, but the process is the same and the awareness is priceless. So the next time someone tells you to be mindful and present and think about what you're doing before you do it, remember this email, remember this message, remember to pause. And I hope that gives you some additional insight to the concept that, again, is well known. I'm not reinventing the wheel here by telling anybody to take a second, to not immediately act, but rather think through what you are about to do and decide if you actually want to do it or not. But the reasoning behind that action and behavior is truly powerful if you have the awareness of what the triggers end up being, because that puts you in a position in which you can then, in future situations, acknowledge the triggers and then actually stop and change your following behaviors and actions because you've become aware and conscious of them. Whereas in most cases, when stress is high, we're not able to think that logically, that clearly. The glucose in our brain has literally been depleted from that stress and everything else that we're doing throughout the day, that we're put into this scenario in which we respond based off emotional feeling and sensation as opposed to logical, rational decision making. And it's no fault of your own. You're literally just fatigued mentally. This makes it that much easier to actually be present, mindful, and conscious in that decision making. And I believe you're going to find yourself in many situations like this over the next couple of weeks, over the next month, during the holiday season. And for many people, even, if you work in the tax field, right, over the following months after the first of the year, things are going to start to ramp up there. Everybody goes through this at different points in time. I mean, the start of this entire podcast episode would lead me to say that, oftentimes they do actually happen simultaneously as well. But it's not just unique to the end of the year or the holiday season. These things are universal, and these strategies in managing them, acknowledging them, managing them can be priceless along your health and fitness journey so that you can do exactly what I described here. The ultimate main goal is to keep the priorities the same, keep them at the forefront of your thoughts before you actually act and before you actually carry out any of the behaviors. Before we see behavior change, whether it be for the good or for the bad. We would want positive behavior change to come from a logically thought out place as well, not just by happenstance. And so awareness is key. Awareness is powerful. It leads to consistency with habits, behaviors, and ultimately through seasons like this, when everybody feels like we are in a rut, the reminder that the strain on those routines, on those habits and behaviors is normal, but it is not a death sentence. It doesn't mean that you are not allowed to adjust. It doesn't mean you are not allowed to adapt. And it doesn't mean that you only have two options. It is not binary. It is not pass or fail. It is, you have these priorities, you have these intentions, you have these things that you are aiming to focus on, and the behaviors and actions can always change, but the goal and the intentions and the priorities stays the same. So if you're feeling the same way that the majority of my clients are feeling right now, that the majority of the country and potentially even the world is feeling right now, you are not alone. It is normal, and you still have power. You still have control. And that starts with awareness and recognition of the season that you're in and what you are facing and the strain on those habits and routines. So hopefully this was helpful. If you are somebody who feels like you would benefit from a little bit more in-depth one-on-one conversation, you can always reach out to me on my Instagram page at Coach John Knoll. You can apply for one-on-one coaching. We can hop on a one-on-one consultation call. You can send me your name and email and inquire about being on this podcast, but transparently, the openings for that have been booked out now through March and almost even into April. So that would probably take a little bit of time, but I always have openings for those who inquire about one-on-one coaching. And I always throw up Q&A boxes on my Instagram. You can always send me a DM on there. You can always put a comment in the bottom of this podcast episode or any of the podcast episodes, because I always do my best to be anyway, just one message away for anyone who has any struggles regarding their health and fitness. And when it comes to these things, as always, remember, there are no right answers. There's just nuance. I'm John Knoll. Thanks for listening.